Well, again, good morning. My name is Isu Ma'at. I am the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Orlando Magic, and I am extremely excited to be here today with our guests as we continue our month-long Walk With Us Town Hall series in celebration of Black History Month. So again, happy Black History Month. You can learn more about our remaining webinars and celebrations, including the opportunity to celebrate in person at our February 27th home game against the Utah Jazz by visiting orlandomagic.com/walk with us. Today's webinar is focused on the diversity of business to basketball. We have invited our partners to be part of the conversation as we continue to collaborate on diversity, equality, and social justice. Please join me in welcoming our special guests. First, Jessica Brazier, Vice President and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for AdventHealth. Jessica, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Isu.
Next, Candace Matthews, the Chief Reputation Officer for Amway. Candace, good morning.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be with you.
And last but certainly not least, Derek Lewis, President of the South Division of PepsiCo North America. Derek, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here as well.
My pleasure. Okay, this week we're going to do something a little different. We have an icebreaker in store. And so we are going to start with some poll questions before we begin our conversation. We'll also have the opportunity for the audience to ask questions via our Slido platform. You can use your phone and please do use your phone to scan the QR code on your screen to ask questions of our panel or visit slido.com. Again, SLIDO.com and enter the code Walk With Us. But if you go there now, the first poll question is up and it reads, according to a report produced by Deloitte, cognitive diversity can enhance team innovation by what percent? 10%, 20%, or 30%? And Jessica, you cannot answer because those who don't know, Jessica has spent a lot of time with Deloitte. So I'm assuming she knows the answer. We'll give you all a few more minutes to answer the first question. According to a report produced by Deloitte, cognitive diversity can enhance team innovation by what percentage? And so drum roll, the answer to the question is 20%. Don't go away yet. We have 3 more questions. Next question, according to research produced by Glassdoor, what percentage of job seekers consider workplace diversity an important factor when considering employment opportunities? Is it 50%? 39% or 67%. Okay, so 39% is in the lead right now. 50% is in second place, going back and forth with 67%. This is great. I like this. And so the answer, drum roll, the answer is 67%. A lot of 39%ers there. Next question, by 2025, Gen Y will represent what percent of the US domestic workforce? When I had Candace play the Trivial Pursuit game, she was floored by the answer here. Let's see what's coming in. Okay, this group, overwhelming percentage of this group has 75% right now And I am going to say that 55% of you have been doing your homework because the answer is actually 75%. Last question. Research by Gartner suggests that inclusive companies are how much more likely to hit their financial goals? Is it 90%, 120% more likely, or 75%? Derek, don't say a word. Everybody else, answer. Again, research by Gartner suggests that inclusive companies are how much more likely to hit their financial goals? 90%, 120%, or 75%? Oh, man, this is good. 90% in the lead, 75% slowly coming up from behind. I'm trying to do it like the horse race here.
Yeah.
120% third place. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The final answer is, and you all are going to be surprised, only 20% of you said 120%, and that is exactly the answer. Okay, panelists, did any of you get all of the answers correct?
Plead the fifth.
And really, it's that information is really the perfect kind of setup for this conversation that we're going to have today, kind of setting the stage for this conversation. And so we'll get right to it. Our first question is for everybody on the panel. We'll go in the order that we did the introduction. So Jessica, you'll go first, and then Candace. But the question is, how does diversity, equity, and inclusion align with the mission, values, and strategic priorities of your organization?
Isu, first of all, thank you for this conversation and for making it so engaging from the very beginning. You know, I can't think of any industry where diversity, equity, and inclusion is more important than in healthcare, especially during these times. You know, we're in the business of serving patients, serving people who are in the most vulnerable positions of their lives sometimes. And this is regardless of age, race, gender, ethnicity, language, so many domains that we cover. And then layer on top of that, Isu at AdventHealth, we're a faith-based organization. In addition to being a healthcare system, we see everyone as a child of God, and to fully live up to our mission of extending the healing ministry of Christ. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is something we have to hold ourselves to a high standard to. And just to kind of set some context around why these are strategic priorities for us and how they show up, AdventHealth, we've got healthcare facilities across 9 states. We're serving about 6 million patients a year in various communities. And to that end, we determined years ago that we would be in a better position to serve our patients, serve our customers, if we reflect and represent the diversity of these communities that our customers are a part of, right? And so to that end, we embed diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything we do. It's in our DNA. In fact, we hold our leaders accountable to diversity metrics for the communities they serve based on the representation of those communities. And I will say this, Isu, I've been here actually less than 2 months, but even our values and service standards, we've got values that say, love me, keep me safe, make it easy, own it. We've even got on my badge, you see here, I say, I care for you like my niece Gemma. So we make it very personal, we humanize it. And I think that's a way that we're able to engage both our team members and our patients in inclusive practices.
I love that. Walking the walk, talking the talk and walking the walk, universal concepts in terms of saving people and faith, walking by that faith. I love it. Candace.
Yes,
We
for
come to you
Amway,
with the same question.
oh, absolutely. For Amway, our founders, Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel, always emphasized that the business was a business for everyone. And so we have to make sure that we honor that heritage through our DE&I. And our vision has always been helping people live better, healthier lives. And how we make that germane to DE&I is we want to make sure that we're actively encouraging everyone to be their true selves and share their diverse perspectives. That way we can unleash their potential and spark solutions and innovation, not only that help the lives of our employees, but the communities in which we serve, the ABOs around the world, and their customers. You know, we like to tell people that they need to be you and be the difference.
Wow.
Because we are so global. We're in 100 countries and territories. So what DE&I means in one country might be different in another. And so the outcomes won't be the same. But what's important is that it's a global priority for all of us. And we have to allow each market to activate it in the way that fits their needs. And part of that is making sure people feel like they belong. And I love the quote that has been said that, you know, diversity is like being invited to the dance, inclusion's being asked to dance, but belonging is dancing like nobody's watching. And that's when people bring out their fullest potential, is when they can truly bring their whole selves to work. So as we look at it, you know, it's not about whether or not we should be having conversations and plans around DE&I. It's really about how. And with those conversations, one of the things that I'm encouraging people is that they have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the conversations aren't easy. But if we don't get comfortable with being uncomfortable, we won't be able to progress it and have the conversations that are needed.
Candace, I love that. Not if, but how. The business is a business for everyone. And I love this. I'm going to come back to you here on this question, on this comment that you made about the conversations, because I know you all are having other conversations. Would you talk really quickly about the organizational conversations you all are having that I believe you called unity circles? Unity
circles, yes, unity circles. They are something that actually was quite demanded by the people, by our employees. There was this groundswell that people needed to have a safe place to have conversations about some of these tough issues. So we created these unity circles where people, self-select to come in and just have a safe conversation. And it's a place that they can, talk about anything. We actually have them once every month, all virtually. But one of the unique things, the very early unity circles that we had, it came out that there were some people of color that said, I don't even feel comfortable running in certain parts of the community. I feel like I'm going to be profiled. And they took the unity circles to unity circle runs. And people in the unity circle says, you know what? Awesome. I'm going to run with you. Let's all meet at such and such a place so that we can run together and everybody feels safe. That was employees helping employees. And that was just one of the greatest outcomes that we've had. And so we've continued them, and they're tough, but people are learning and they're feeling like they have a safe place to discuss it.
In some ways, Candace, we're kind of having a unity circle right now.
That's right.
Derek, we have you here bringing up the rear, but I know you have a lot to say on this particular issue as well. How about how diversity, equity, and inclusion align with the mission, vision, and strategic priorities for your organization?
No, thanks for your question. First of all, DE&I aligns very well with the mission, values, and strategic priorities of PepsiCo. For us, the way I look at it, people are our culture, and so when people are part of a company where they can see themselves, their own values are reflected where they work, essentially being yourself every day, that helps build a tremendous amount of pride and ownership in the organization. This helps us with recruitment, this helps us with retention, this helps us with engagement, empowerment, because we're obviously, when we respond to societal challenges that impact our associates on a personal and professional level, it creates an environment where they truly feel valued, and protected. And that was really certainly came out in a big way throughout all of 2020. One of the things that obviously stood out for us is our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we launched a $7 million initiative to go respond to those in need of COVID help in terms of medical, economic aid, particularly to our communities of color in the Black and Latino communities around the country. where our company was built in many of these communities and supporting these communities. And right, and these are the places also where a lot of our associates come from. People live, they work, they play, they eat here. And so when they see us showing up in our communities the way we do and as strong as we do, that positively impacts how they show up in their job and then being themselves in the job. And so that's real important from a culture standpoint. And then, look, also we have tremendous size and scale across the country. And so we have the responsibility and also unique opportunity to help drive those changes to improve diversity, certainly within our industry and outside our industry. And so that's really a very purposeful thing. So it aligns very, very well with what we want to do at PepsiCo.
I love that. And Derek, is there anything Beyonce would like to add?
Beyonce, do you have anything you'd like to add? She said, totally aligned with what I just said. Totally aligned.
Okay. Beyonce says ditto. Candace. And so again, I love what you said. It's not about if, it's how. So what is the business case for diversity in your organization? I think you kind of alluded to it in your initial answer, but what is your exact business case for diversity in your organization? And what are some of the top DEI goals for 2021?
DE&I is critical to our future. And when we think about it, our culture is we're trying to live what we call the founder's growth mindset. And we say that is lead with heart, live to serve, and love to learn. Well, in order to do that, you really have to include all people from all perspectives and create a culture where it is, great, where everybody wants to learn and grow from each other. And for us, that's important because of how global we are and all the different cultures with which we operate. And also our ABOs from around the world are from all different cultures. That's so right. We don't learn from them and from the people in the markets as to what's needed for them. We're not doing our jobs. So if we look at the goals that we have and where our focus is, it's really making our leaders accountable. They have to drive that inclusive feeling, making sure that they have diverse teams and people feel included. And then we put the tools around them to help them. But also, we have to make sure that our culture includes everyone at all levels. It's not good enough to bring people in at the entry level. We've got to make sure that it goes through all levels of the organization and making leaders, again, accountable for making people feel safe and bringing out their best. Yeah. And so the other area of focus is really about our diverse workforce. We have to reflect the people that we serve, and we serve everybody. And so our workforce has to reflect that. And the other thing that we're bringing in is the facts and data that really help turn these actions. So what are the KPIs that we're going to be using to measure ourselves to make sure, because what doesn't get measured doesn't get done.
Doesn't get done. So a critique that I received recently in these panel conversations is that we typically talk about how beautiful the baby is, but we don't really get into what some of the challenges and obstacles are. Would you mind indulging us a little bit on what are some of the obstacles that could potentially impede the progress for what you're talking about?
So when people get busy, they tend to say, I don't have time for that, or I've got all this. We all have a million other things that we could be doing. So if we don't make sure that we are making it a priority and holding our leaders accountable, it will go nowhere. Yeah. This is something that is going to require everyone to make a change. And so we have to hold ourselves accountable and each other accountable, or it will not make any progress.
Thanks for that, Candace. Derek, I'm going to come to you, slightly different side of this conversation. Like us, you all have been very involved in racial equality and social justice. Can you talk a little bit about how the fight for racial equality and social justice impacts the business model of your organization and what you all are doing in response?
No, thanks for that question. Look, it's a very important question. It's very, very connected to the business propositions we have. And I offer a few thoughts. Number one, the most diverse teams are the best team, the best winning and the most winning teams. Studies have shown over and over again that the most diverse teams outperform the non-diverse teams by a wide margin. It's not even something we're talking about, it's close. And I think you got to look at this notion, diversity benefits companies across the board, better decision-making, thinking about innovation, thinking about how you collaborate better, more creativity, because you bring these different perspectives to the table that people have different views on. That makes you better, makes you stronger, makes you certainly think more strategically about things. Second point I make is a diverse team, certainly at more of this more senior level, is better understand how to, appeal to customers, to consumers, to the communities, to the marketplace, which is especially important in our country as the trends shift more and more multicultural. You talked about some of the Gen Y trends that you mentioned earlier. Like, as that increasingly shifts, that mix, it's more and more important for you to understand the dynamics of that cohort and that consumer group. And so we're obviously a large and very scaled business. We have to understand that more than anybody, for that matter, to be really relevant in the future. And so it's important, again, to have a leadership team that will reflect the conditions of the marketplace as we go forward. So you can connect with those consumers and customers and community in a very, very different way, in a very authentic way. And then last, hey, this is something that's really important, I think, as you aspire to move up through the ranks. You can't be what you can't see. So people that are coming through the organization, if they don't see people at the top who look like them, it's really hard and difficult for you to see a path forward. You don't have the mentors, you don't have the role models that you have to have. So I think it's extremely important that there's visibility at the top of the house for the people that are coming in to see that they can dream big, and that they can one day be in your shoes, and they can have somebody to help show a path there. I think it also leads to more inclusivity around the company, better retention, better engagement holistically. And right, so those are my thoughts on how we're doing it. We stepped up big with a $400 million plus commitment on racial equality journey, we refer to as REJ, an organization. The response to that has been overwhelmingly positive by the associates. There's a lot of engagement that we have to have across the company. I know you mentioned obstacles, and you didn't really, I didn't know so necessarily get that question, but the things that my sort of benchmarking and scorecard for an organization that I call it the key checklist. It's a CARES acronym, CARES. One is you got to have a commitment. I think that's important. Two, you have to have accountability. Three, you have to have resources. You can't just say things and not provide resources to people to get things done. I think 4, the E is empowerment. You have to empower those in your organization to get things done. This cannot be just driven from the top. You have to empower associates throughout the company to uphold the mission, values of the organization, and allow people to take action. And I think S and CARES is scorecarding. You have to keep the score. You have to absolutely know and track your progress to ensure that you're making the strides that you want to make against that. And you can always, pivot, reallocate, move some things around. But I use that CARES model as a checklist when people ask me all about, hey, is this organization really bought in? I start asking people, let's go through the CARES checklist. And that's a way for me to gauge whether or not that people are on track or not on track. So that's something I utilize to determine whether or not there are obstacles. And hey, if you're off in one of those areas, how do you go in as an organization? How do you as a leader go in and try to close those gaps? I've had to do those. I've had to do that in some of those situations. So this journey is not an easy journey. Let's recognize that. It's an important journey. It's one that we all have to, embrace and show some courage with. Certainly, as we have leadership roles in the organization, it's something I've chosen to do. Company has been tremendously strong at backing me up and allowing me to do what I need to do to lead a way forward here. And I'm very proud of that and honored and blessed to have that opportunity. But it does take some courage to push through the obstacles that you will encounter, because no one can sit here and say it's easy to go through. It's not. It's a big journey. It's a tough journey, complex journey in some cases, certainly the larger the organization is. But it's a journey that absolutely has to happen for us all to be united and create this, call it, unparalleled level of unity and teamwork that I know we're all striving for to be successful.
Competence, confidence, and courage. I love it. Derek, who are some of how did you arrive at this perspective? Like, who are some of the leaders that inspired you and kind of got you to think about CARES and got you to think about building a business this way?
No, that's a great question as well. Look, one of my greatest role models was a PepsiCo employee. His name was Alan McKellar Jr. He was the first African-American hired in corporate America ever back in the early 1940s, 1942. He went to South Carolina State. Pepsi had offered an essay contest. They offered internships to 20 winners based on an essay contest. Alan McKellar was one of those 20. Jeanette Mound, she was an African-American female that went to Hampton. University, my alma mater, were two winners of the 20, both African Americans, the first of its kind in corporate America. Alan went on after he did military service, came back and was part of the first Black sales force in corporate America in the mid 1940s. And that led to obviously, tremendous strides in our business and building our business throughout pockets of the country, and led to the first vice president, Harvey C. Russell, back in 1963. So Alan and I had a relationship. He passed away a few years ago. He'd be 101 this year. I got to know him very, very well for the last probably 12 to 15 years of his life. He was a very strong mentor of mine. So when you're able to connect with a pioneer, when you're able to talk to somebody that really went through the struggle, we think we know what the struggle is. We don't know what the struggle is, like he did. He knew the struggle.
That's right.
He went through the struggle. And so he was able to set a lot of context for me on the journey he had gone through and his peers had gone through. And it gave me a lot of courage, gave me a lot of hope and optimism that I could carry that on. I feel a very sense of a lot of pride in carrying that mission forward in the company. I wouldn't be where I am today if there weren't people like Alan and Jeanette, Harvey Russell back in the 40s and 60s, and a company like PepsiCo that wasn't afraid to make those bold moves of putting people of color into those kind of roles. No other companies were able to do that and willing to do that at that time. And so I feel like I'm in the era now, in a situation where I can create that legacy, can extend that legacy that those folks carried for me through the next generation. And so I'm not afraid. I have really no fear at all going through that mission. And people like Alan were able to help me sort of gain perspective around that. So I would say those early pioneers in PepsiCo were my heroes. You can read all about them in the Real Pepsi Challenge book. They inspired me to where I am today. And there are others that obviously have followed behind them, but they got it started for me, and it's my job to carry that forward for them.
This is so powerful and so inspiring. I hope, kind of looking behind the curtain a little bit to realize that, your success is not happening in a vacuum, but it's part of a continuum. Candace, you and I had a very similar conversation. I'm going to go on the script and ask you the question I'm supposed to ask you, but you have to share your testimony as well about your pioneer.
Oh, yes. You're so right, Derek, in that none of us do this alone. We've all been taught by someone. And my mentor was Ann Fudge, who became one of the highest ranking African-American women in corporate America. When I was in business school, she interviewed me and hired me in 1985. And she said to me, I will teach you everything you need to know to be successful in life and in the corporate world. And all I ask in return is that you teach somebody else. Mm-hmm. So she was teaching me to pay it forward before pay it forward became in vogue. And I've taken that to heart, because if we don't show others what they can be and how to be it, then their chances of success are minimal. And she would tell me to come in, talk to her, get it all out. It's not fair. It's not whatever it was. And she would clean me back up and send me back out, emboldened to take it on. And I benefited so much from a mentor like that. And so I have taken it very seriously to mentor others, but that's part of our job too. And not only to mentor others, to teach people in the organization who don't really understand. They don't have to be people of color, especially our colleagues. We have to teach them how important all of this mentoring is.
That's right. That's right. And my mentors, Russell Goins and Faye Waddleman, but the question I'm supposed to ask you, and I'm going to ask you, Candace, is really for everyone. And that is, and again, you've been talking about this already, but fostering a culture of inclusion and respect and belonging. You hear it a lot. It's top of mind for a lot of organizations. What does it actually look like when the process goes right? And what does it look like when it goes wrong? I know for me, I like to say, it's one thing to say, bring your whole self to work. I'm not sure we really want to bring our whole self, but I invite everybody to bring their best self to work. But what does it look like when it goes right? And what does it look like when it goes wrong? Jessica, you're coming right after Candace.
When it goes right, accountability starts from the top.
Yes.
And they infuse it into the whole organization and don't accept it when people are not adhering to it. Mm-hmm. That's the best you can ask for, because the accountability is for everyone, and it's starting from the top. When it doesn't go right, it's just a bunch of lip service.
Right.
And your employees can see through all of that. So if we are not consistent in everything we do, not just our talk, but our walk, then it falls flat and it goes nowhere. And nothing's worse than losing the credibility of your organization by not walking the talk.
That's right. Jessica, would you like to
Yeah.
add to this?
Yeah, sure. And I have to echo so much of what Candace said, and even some of what Derek said earlier. You know, I'd almost compare it to a dysfunctional versus a functional family when it goes wrong versus when it goes right. But I will say, when it goes wrong, it stops at the D. It stops at the diversity and doesn't get into the inclusion and equity. And
Good point.
when you have that, a lot of your team members feel unseen. They don't feel valued. They don't feel appreciated. They don't bring themselves to work in a way they can share and contribute to add value to those complex missions that so many organizations have today. And the opposite of that is when it goes right. They come bringing themselves to work. And Derek mentioned this earlier, when we've got really simple problems to solve, maybe having a homogeneous group of thinkers is okay. But with the types of problems we are solving and the mission sets we have today, we need as many diverse minds bringing all of themselves to work to apply themselves to those challenges. And when it goes right, not only are they doing that, but you're able to recruit the top talent, keep them there, and they're performing to the best of the mission.
Love that. Derek,
I
your
went to that,
perspective?
I went to that CARES acronym I used earlier. I think it's real important to check that. And if any one of those are out, so if the commitment's not there, this thing falls apart. If you don't have accountability, this thing falls apart. If you don't put resources, incremental resources on the ground, this falls apart. If you don't have an empowerment model where you can trust people to carry on the mission, it's going to fall apart. Again, if you don't have a way to keep the score, I think things are going to fall apart, right? So that's my checklist of when things go right, those things are all in place. They cascaded, everybody's on the same page. It flows to the organization. You really have a sense of momentum. We have that now. I mean, we have it in a big, big way. It's not like we all got off track, but our momentum was, call it very, very strong and it, flattened out. And now we're getting momentum back. It's really picking up a lot of steam because the CARES model sort of is all in place and we're living it day to day. And I really appreciate that. But yeah, that's it for me. That's the checklist that I use and to test the realities of, is it there, is it not there? And it's really, really easy to identify gaps if you use that.
I think that's a great litmus test. And ultimately, and it was said earlier, what gets measured gets done. Jessica, can you talk a little bit about racial disparities in healthcare? Again, another topical issue, but racial disparities in healthcare and the steps taken by AdventHealth to ensure high quality and equitable care for all patients. I know you alluded to this earlier with your comments about, serving all people and being a faith-based organization, but would you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, and I think I'll even continue it based on what Derek just said. He talked about this scorecard, this holding ourselves accountable.
Mhm.
And sometimes we just take it for granted that just because something is baked into our mission or our values, that will just automatically make progress. But we've got to be intentional. And that intentionality, to Candace's earlier point, has to start from the top. And what our leadership has done in terms of being intentional, we've actually put more attention to equity. We appointed a chief health equity officer. He's my partner in crime, talented physician named Ulrich Simmons, also a chief medical officer. And it's a role that directly addresses some of the disparities we are seeing in healthcare, some of the inequities we're seeing in healthcare. And when we talk about equity, we're asking ourselves, how do we ensure that everyone has a fair opportunity to be as healthy as possible? And Isu and my fellow panelists, we know that due to a range of factors we often refer to as social determinants of health, it could be lack of access to education, housing, even healthcare, transportation. It could be issues related to discrimination, that not everybody is having the same experience. And this has really been manifested this past year with the COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing that communities of color, not only are they having a higher rate of infection, but we're seeing that the severity of infection is also much more with communities of color. And even now, with vaccinations available, we're seeing that due to a history of mistrust and abuse, a lot of communities of color are hesitant to take the vaccine. So this work on equity allows us to look at that more closely. Ulrich's team, Dr. Simmons' team, is doing a lot of research, applying rigor to this space so that we can not only measure and manage what we're doing for our patients, but make sure that we're giving our team members, the people providing care, all the tools, the resources, and cultural competency education so that we're serving people in the way that they need to be treated.
Jessica, that's so important, so extraordinary. And yet, we all know working in this space, what you hear a lot of times is, well, we didn't know. So what are you all doing to amplify this and get this message out more broadly to the community?
Wow, I am so glad you asked that, Isu. And I'll take, for example, some of the messaging around COVID testing and COVID awareness on public health best practices to stay safe, and even vaccination hesitancy. We've had to really go beyond marketing to understand communities' needs at the most detailed levels and to get into places where you might not expect corporate AdventHealth or a healthcare system to be. We're in churches, we're in fraternities and sororities, we're getting the messages out in new places. We've even partnered with community partners such as Mi Clinica Salud in East Orlando, for example, knowing that certain populations really prefer to get information in their preferred language, their first language. And so that's given us the opportunity to really make services that are needed available to people who might not otherwise get it because of concerns of trust if something is not happening in a familiar way. We're doing a lot of partnerships at this level to just make sure that we have reach and breadth as we try to educate societies, not just taking it to the point where people who arrive at our doorsteps at our facilities are getting care, but that we're proactively reaching them where they are, whether it's taking a mobile unit to provide testing or other options like that that make it really easy and accessible.
You mentioned the rigor. That's what the rigor looks like.
Yeah.
One more question for the entire panel, and we'll start landing the plane here. But I also want to let everybody know, again, feel free if you have a question for the panel to go to slido.com and add your question there. And I will be more than happy to raise the question with who the question is directed at. Back to you, Derek. And again, this question is going to be for everybody, but are there tangible ways for companies to leverage what's happening from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint to enhance the overall value of your strategic partnerships and your corporate partnerships?
Oh, I do. I think it's certainly a very unique opportunity. I start out with first is you've got to have real authentic conversations about all the root causes to the problems that we're seeing, So I think we've got to be able to generate courageous conversation, have I call real talk, and, sort of break this notion, create discomfort to get to comfort, And so I think that's the first thing is call it having real talk. I think the second area is actually walking the talk, So we've got to have, go again, whether it goes through the CARES model or having real programs on the ground and showing really authenticity that you are walking the talk. So it's hard to have a conversation on these issues and say, yeah, we care a lot about these issues, but yeah, if you look inside your organization or, you look at the things that you're doing as part of the organization and it doesn't reflect what needs to happen in the marketplace, it's a bit not authentic. It's not authentic, right? And so therefore, to me, that creates challenges in that. So I think there's a notion of having some authenticity. So courageous conversation, a level of authenticity. And then I think you got to absolutely put programs on the ground, work together with your partners to address some of these issues. We've created Pepsi Stronger Together. We've already have programs developed. I know with Orlando Magic, we started out at Harbor House. We've got many, many more in the pipeline. So I was very appreciative that we were able to get a program like that off the ground. Looking again, having common sort of ground on some of the issues that are taking place in the marketplace. You guys are great at how you approach the market and community efforts that you've done for many, many years. Our pillars are all around, we have a people pillar, we have a business pillar and a community pillar. All those are very, very important to us. And harnessing the power of business and partners to help communities in need, I think, is the most important thing right now that scaled partners can do together. So that's our approach at it. And I think we have a unique opportunity. We're already off the ground with you guys, and there's more to come. So I'm excited about what the remainder of this year holds in our future at making this community one of the strongest in America.
Same here, Derek. Candace?
Okay, Derek just said it all. But I will,
Ditto.
but I will add how important it is for us to learn from each other.
Yes.
We don't all need to reinvent the wheel. And Derek, forgive me because I'm stealing CARES and taking it back to my organization. And even in last week's webinar, when the coach spoke, and I hope, Asa, you'll recreate that statement because it was so powerful.
Yes.
And again, it's the partnerships that enable us to get all of it, to leverage all this learning, because there's so much great work going on and we can't figure it all out, but we can sure learn from each other and bring that to our respective organizations and communities.
Yeah, that was quite the moment last week when, and I think I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit, but when Coach Cliff said, look, I'm not a racist, but I haven't done a good enough job of being an anti-racist. I think really, more importantly, there's more work for us all to do. Mm-hmm. Jessica?
It's always a shame going third because my fellow panelists have really said it all. But I will add, you know what? I am so optimistic because we are seeing this shift in consciousness that makes the potential for impact so rich. And what I do want to say about community and corporate partnerships is that we are beginning to see strength in numbers and strength in coming together. And there is a richness in having diversity of thought, diversity of industry, tackling these really big problems together, these really big challenges together. In fact, when I was at Deloitte, before coming to AdventHealth, we would talk about wicked problems, and we would literally bring people to design centers from all industries to tackle how we could solve a problem, trying to bring innovative thought to how we would apply that thinking in a new way. And I see the opportunity with our corporate sponsors and sponsorships and partnerships to do the same thing. I'm so excited about our training center with the Orlando Magic that we're doing. I'm so excited about some of the education institutions that we're supporting to make sure our communities are educated and have access to the information they need. And I think all of those organizations and institutions coming together will bring a collective consciousness to diversity, equity, and inclusion that will push us all forward.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely know and believe that there is value in coming together, as you all have said. There is one question from the participants. The question is around measuring DEI initiatives, and it says, how are you measuring DEI at every level of the organization? Example, ownership, board, senior management, frontline. How are you improving at the highest level? This question feels to me, it's speaking to a representation question. And so I know there was a conversation earlier around scorecards to measure representation at every level. I want to give you all the opportunity to respond to that question. And in general, what's some of the other metrics and some of the other key performance indicators that your organization is evaluating? Derek, you want to start?
Sure. Like I mentioned earlier, our REJ is built really fundamentally off of three pillars, right? There's a people pillar, there's a business pillar, and there's a community pillar. And so on the people, as you can imagine, representation is a significant part of that. And so we definitely have specific goals as it relates to gender parity, increase in minority representation at all levels in the organization. We look very, very good, obviously, in the more frontline levels of our organization. Our goal, obviously, is aspire to be a lot more like the marketplace, above the marketplace, at more senior levels. So we've got goals that are in place in the next 3 to 5 years that will significantly advance sort of that representation level in the more senior roles in the organization, not only from a gender parity standpoint, but also racial standpoint, minority standpoint. And then underneath that, also there's cultural things we're going to work on in terms of training and continue to harnessing the power of our employee resource groups. We have a plethora of employee resource groups that are all about, certainly individuality, but also collaboration. And those groups work together very well to drive the mission of, making people feel special at PepsiCo. Then you move through the business pillar. There are supplier goals there. There are goals we have supporting minority-owned businesses, whether they're restaurants or other suppliers. And so there are goals associated with the spending levels that we have in those areas. Also, our ability to bring mentorship and bringing people on board so they can qualify or participate in some of the PepsiCo programs. And then the community work, I talked a lot about Pepsi Stronger Together. That's just increasing reach, community by community by community, leveraging, again, the partnerships that we have in the marketplace, addressing all the different needs of the community. And so we're able to really track against how we're doing against all three of those areas on a continuous basis. And again, our goals are, to have what I consider to be a gold standard in place in all three of those pillars, and certainly in the short term as well as the long term.
Thanks, Derek. Candace?
Again, Derek, he's so comprehensive with all of this. I think there's only a couple of things I would add. One is when we talk about our workforce, one of the metrics that we have is the diverse candidate slate.
Yes.
Because if you can't build a pipeline, if you don't even begin to bring people in, and if you don't interview them, you can't be bringing people in. So I think that's one that I would add. And another metric we are looking at is the fairness around promotions.
Yes.
No, is everybody being brought to the table? Is the opportunity truly equal for all? And so those are the two other aspects I would just add to what he said.
That's great. Thanks, Candace.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica, I'm sorry I did it to you again, and I made you last after following Derek and Candace, but I know you're ready.
It's much of the same. With diversity, the only thing I'd add is something I hit on a little bit earlier, is that especially when we're delivering care to communities, we do measure ourselves against the community index of diversity to see how, especially our management teams, are reflective of the communities that we're serving, which we all know from research helps us to make sure that we're providing culturally competent care with all viewpoints being considered. And when it comes to inclusion, a lot of the same metrics that Derek and Candace mentioned, but we're also measuring belonging. How our employees feel valued, appreciated, respected, like they're part of this team. And we've been implementing new ways to get to that measurement, including with some very sophisticated surveys that help us understand that better. And then I would just add, in healthcare, the other big one is equity. We've got a range of clinical metrics that we have to look at in terms of patient outcomes. I mentioned to you the rate of COVID infections, or the rate of hospitalizations, or even deaths. And we have to break that out by different stratifications so that we can understand what's happening in the communities we serve and where we might need to have more targeted interventions.
Yeah. Supplier diversity, brand reputation, representation, these are also all part of the overall value proposition that you have to build with diverse communities if we expect to be successful doing business with diverse communities. Coming to the end here, Professor Rosebeth Moss-Cantor from Harvard, I found it interesting. She said there are 6 steps to inspiring, lasting, and sustainable change. And real quick, she said the first step is that you have to show up. The second step is that you have to speak up. She said the third step, which I really love, You have to look up, meaning that your purpose and your mission has to be bigger than you, right? Deion Sanders said, if your dream ain't bigger than you, there's a problem with your dream. Her fourth step was to team up. And that's something that you all talked about today, especially in the context of the partnerships. She said, number 5, never give up. And she talked about the ugly middle. She said, in the beginning, everything is beautiful. If you make it through, it's great at the end. She said, but the middle's always ugly. And she said, last but not least, lift others up. I thank every last one of you for showing up, speaking up, looking up. I know you're never going to give up. And I heard you say already how you're lifting others up. Again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who joined the conversation today virtually. We hope that you can join the magic every Wednesday. We have 2 more conversations in this series. So we hope that you will join us and continue in our celebration of Black History Month. Again, you can visit orlandomagic.com/walk with us for additional information. Jessica, Candace, Derek, you all are awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Isu.
My pleasure. Take care and stay safe.